Good morning, Kellyanne.
Good morning, Allison.
Thanks so much for being with us. This is obviously a busy day, as it always is. Lots of breaking news. What do you, I want to ask you about Adam Entis's reporting that he's just shared with us from the Washington Post, that this goes the furthest we've seen to connecting President Putin of Russia to actually giving the directive to interfere in the U.S. election and to try to hurt Hillary Clinton. What's the White House's response to this?
Well, the president has said previously, and we've got confirmation now from Jay Johnson, from Adam Schiff, from Dan Coates, from Jim Comey, from Mike Rogers, that there's no evidence of collusion, number one, and number two, that this didn't have an impact on the electoral result. And I think it's very important to show no nexus has been proven between what Russia or any other foreign government tried to do and the actual election result. Really, the only person making that case prominently is Hillary Clinton. And you've got everyone saying that there is no nexus, that not a single vote was changed, and we're going to stand by that. We know that Donald Trump won fairly and squarely 306 electoral votes. Yes, it had nothing to do with interference.
We know that as well. But what about this new reporting that there are 36 high-level officials that say that they can connect President Putin with giving instructions to hack the DNC computers and to plant fake stories? What is the current White House doing about this?
Well, Allison, the president has said previously, and he stands by that, particularly as president-elect, that he would be concerned about anybody interfering in our democracy. We saw a lot of people interfering with our democracy by saying he couldn't win here at home. But I really am struck by former Homeland Security Secretary Jay Johnson's testimony earlier this week, which you covered extensively, where he seemed very frustrated that the DNC refused the help of the DHS because DHS knew that the DNC was vulnerable.
Yeah.
The RNC, I'm sure, was vulnerable, but had those safeguards and protections in place and had a different result. And so it's very clear that even in the Obama administration, there was concern. There were actions trying to be taken. But the question for the DNC is, why were you so arrogant in not letting the Homeland Security of your own administration help you?
That's fine. But my question for you is, what is the White House, what is President Trump now doing to prevent Russia from doing this again?
Well, this report is new, and we'll discuss it with him later. But he's been very clear on the record that he believes in any type of numbers of measures to make sure that democracy flourishes and that our voter integrity is intact.
Such
he, in fact, has an entire commission on that.
Against Russia, what is he doing specifically to try to stop this?
Allison, I realize that we just like to say the word Russia, Russia to mislead the voters, and I know that CNN is aiding and abetting this nonsense as well, but you've asked him the same question 3 times now, and I'm answering it.
And you're not answering it, Kellyanne.
Yes, I am. He's the President of the United States.
And what's he doing?
He has said very clearly that he wants the voter integrity and the ballot integrity to be protected.
And what
action
action is he taking?
Any type of interference at this very moment, at this very second?
Yes.
Oh, yes, because we have nothing to say about Russian collusion or affecting the electoral outcome.
Kellyanne,
those rabbit holes did not bear fruit.
Kellyanne, I don't understand what you're doing in terms of trying to talk about collusion.
I've answered the question 4 times.
You haven't told us what action is the White House doing to stop Russian interference in elections?
The White House the president has met with his national security team many times. He has an initiative or a commission on voter integrity, and he himself has used the power of the bully pulpit to express his resistance towards any type of outside interference. So, again, I've answered the question several times. But this is an ongoing process. You're dealing with a very new report. So we will look at that as well as we do.
Fair enough. This is a new report, but the idea that Russia interfered has been obviously around since now we know before the election.
Yeah, Jay Johnson seemed very frustrated with his own DNC about it. I agree with you.
And in fact, he said that there was great concern that if they did anything openly, that they would challenge the integrity of the election process itself. And now, look, you've heard from this new report that President Obama was afraid that Vladimir Putin would up the ante, would ratchet it up. But I understand you haven't read this report yet. That's fine this morning. But still, this has been going on for months. So the president talking about it, do you think that he's done enough to sending a signal to Russia to stop this?
I think the president has been very clear on how he feels about this issue and many others. But you know, Allison, he also has a very full roster. I know that CNN and others don't want to cover it. He just last week opened up a $100 million investment in apprenticeship programs. 90% of people who go through these skills certification apprentice programs are employed in short order with an average of $60,000 salary. Where's the reporting on that? This week, just back here, Secretary Price and I met with Obamacare victims. They're real. They're suffering.
Yeah.
They've been left behind out of the Affordable Care Act. If you want their information, I'll provide it to them. You can interview them.
Yeah,
He's helping with job creation. The
Kellyanne,
markets love his presidency. There's so much real people impact happening here that doesn't get covered on the altar of Russia.
Well, I mean, Kellyanne, I think that a lot of people think that Russia trying to interfere in our democracy is a big story.
It is, but there are other stories, and I know we're all capable of covering many of them. You have a 24/7 cable news outlet that certainly can fill lots of content. I'm giving you great story ideas because we hear from people every day. They want him, and certainly in these special elections, people have rejected this Russia obsession because they like the fact there's job creation, regulation is being rolled back.
Yes, we do cover, obviously, the jobs report, Kellyanne. And I know that everyone's a producer and everybody has ideas of what CNN should cover. But, Kellyanne, I think that part of the problem, thank you, is that the president has not given a terribly full-throated announcement that he believes that Russia interfered. He says things like, they may have, it may have been China.
Allison, so we're just asking that we're having the same conversation through 6 different semantic differences. That's fine. It's your show. You can ask me what you want, but I will just remind you as politely as I possibly can that this entire conversation was irrelevant to the voters in these 4 special elections. Everybody tried as hard as they could to make it about something other than job creation, the rollback of draconian and Byzantine regulations, the unleashing of entrepreneurship, including if these small business owners, and I was one for over 20 years, gets a 15 to 20% tax bracket, that will be monumentally transformative in our country's economy. This is important things that people want to focus on. Yesterday, the Senate released their health care legislation. The president's making good on that promise.
Let's talk about that. I do want to talk about that. Let's move on to health care, because you're right, that does affect every single person in America, and they're very interested in this. During the campaign, the president, then candidate Donald Trump, said he would not touch Medicaid and Medicare. The latest CBO score, which this new Senate bill does not change, says that it actually would cut $800 billion from Medicare. How does the president explain that change?
Well, what he's doing with Medicaid, what the Senate bill is doing with Medicaid, as I read it, is giving more flexibility to the governors. And the states will have a choice. They can go for block grants or they can go for the current situation. And that will be a choice that they make based on what they know of their populations in their states. There's also no work requirement can be forced, Allison, under Medicaid on the elderly, on pregnant, on the poor, on the non-able-bodied. And so there's more
promise, where he promised that no money would come out of it.
But remember, you're calling a cut something that is being reorganized over time in a way that allows states more flexibility and still guarantees people the coverage that they are accustomed to.
Not really, Kellyanne. I mean, if you cut $800 billion out of it, then it doesn't guarantee the same coverage.
Allison, would you concede that the Affordable Care Act has not worked for all Americans? Because I think we're forgetting why we're even doing this in the first place. What about the 20 million Americans just last year who opted out of this wonderful thing called Obamacare? 6.5 million of them opted to pay the tax and the penalty rather than get Obamacare. What about all the people that we meet with here?
Everyone knows that it's not perfect. That's true, and I won't fight you on that point. But
it's not affordable and it's not sustainable. And you have insurance companies. Even this week, Anthem Inc. pulled out of Wisconsin and Indiana in most of the markets there. I think they're left in one county in Wisconsin.
And lots of Democrats say that we should work on fixing Obamacare. But what about the president's promise? What about that campaign promise about no cuts to Medicaid and Medicare? Now that's changed.
But only in Washington would something like this be called a cut, where over time there are protections in place for the disabled, for the elderly, for the poor, for the non-working poor, for children, for pregnant women. And it's going to allow states to decide what they need to help those in need
with less money
in their states.
States will get less money.
No, not necessarily. It depends. It really depends on the state. It depends on the situation.
Out of it.
You keep on giving that one statistic without reading the entire bill. I read the bill. I'm not Nancy Pelosi. I decided to read it ahead of time.
And so
before, and I'm sure the senators
$800 billion is being put in somewhere else?
No, Allison, what's going to happen is there are many different funding mechanisms at play here. What governors will do is they will have an opportunity to either get block grants or stick with the current situation. And as you remember in the House bill, late in the game, there was an additional many billions of dollars infusion of cash to guarantee that very narrow slice of the population who went with 63 days of non-continuous coverage and also happened to reside in a state where that state will opt out of that type of Medicaid funding. So there are many different protections in there. I just don't want everybody scaring people to think that they're going to lose their benefits and their coverage without giving a full accounting of everything that this includes. It includes very generous expansions of health savings accounts funding. Why is that important? Because it gives people more control over their health care spending. It even allows spouses to do something called catch-up
if they have money to put into them.
This is very important. Those are employees. So this could be employer sponsored. You and I get employer sponsored benefits. 175 million Americans essentially do. Other people get government sponsored benefits. We're trying to help those who are left out of it. The plumbers, the hairdressers, the people who need, the small business owners who need to pool together and share the cost and share the risk.
And Kellyanne, I appreciate all those points, but I know that you're on a tight time constraint. So I want to get to the next topic, and that is the tapes. The audio tapes that the president admitted yesterday didn't exist. Why did the president 42 days ago suggest that there might be audio tapes of his conversations with James Comey?
So the president made very clear in his 2 tweets yesterday and in an interview that was aired earlier this morning, Allison, on Fox News, that he doesn't have tapes. He didn't make tapes. But
why
with all the talk
about,
but he left open the possibility. He left open the possibility that they may exist. There's so much surveillance and unmasking and leaking, as you know, going on. There have been conversations he had early on in his administration with heads of state that were leaked by, who knows, I guess intelligence officials, but we don't know.
So the president thinks that his
concerned.
Conversations in the White House, when he's having a one-on-one conversation with somebody, that somebody might be taping that in the White House, he thinks.
Well, he's just left open the possibility based on his own words and based on what's happened in the past. But on the issue of Jim Comey, did he really need that extra push and incentive to be truthful? Well, all we know from Comey's testimony is that he's a leaker, is that he specifically gave an individual, a private citizen, information, his own memo recording of a private conversation he had with the President of the United States as FBI director, and specifically leaked it to a friend with the expectation that it would trigger a special counsel.
Because of the president's tweets. It was the president's tweet that set this ball in motion. Why did the president?
Why it was. I don't know why Jim Comey testified untruthfully the week before that.
He said it was the tweet that so upset him, the idea that the president suggested that there were audio tapes. But Kellyanne, my question is, why didn't the president clear this up 41 days ago?
He cleared it up in due course, but I want to go back to what you just said. I think it's very important what you just said about the FBI director.
First answer this question, and then we can go to your point.
Why was a tweet like truth serum for him? That's very concerning.
Okay,
is that what you're suggesting?
Why did we live this charade for 41 days that there might be tweets, there might not?
I didn't live any charade. We didn't live any charade here. We're busy creating jobs and rolling back regulations. The stock market and the confidence numbers love it.
Answer definitively about whether there were audio tapes.
He answered definitively yesterday that he has not made such tapes. He doesn't have such tapes, but there could be.
Why didn't he answer it sooner?
Why is he always on your timeline? In other words, it's always.
Kellyanne, this gets back to exactly what you were talking about.
Why didn't he tweet about this? Why didn't he say that? Why isn't he on this timeline?
You're the person who said, why does the media not want to talk about all of the other things that we're engaged in? Had he, the day after he tweeted that, said, okay,
you wouldn't have covered the job creation and the regulation?
Kellyanne, you don't think that this has eclipsed some of the news cycle?
No, I don't. I think everybody wakes up every morning and makes a choice as to what they're going to cover. And look, if the media are not always going to acknowledge their responsibility to be fair and complete in coverage, at least acknowledge your role. Allison, you've got a premier position to help Americans understand what is going on here. You could be the connective tissue with veterans so they know there's a new White House hotline they can access. They know that for the first time in decades, they are looked upon as the same seamless patient to the Department of Defense, to Veterans Affairs. The president today is expected to sign the VA Accountability and Whistleblower Protection Act. I mean, there's so much going on here that people need to know about.
Understood. And we actually just did a big, important veterans story, which we've been out in front of on CNN. But Kellyanne, I don't think that you're answering this question. The president played a cat and mouse game for 41 days about are there audio tapes or are there not audio tapes? And was that a good use of all of our time?
Well, you choose to spend your time on your show however you wish. He's busy doing many things here.
Look,
he hosted bilateral meetings.
Understood, and we've covered those. But this gets to the bigger question of, are we supposed to take the president seriously when he tweets things? Are those honest tweets?
Yes, of course. And first of all, he uses an entire social media platform to connect directly with the public. He cuts out the middleman, and we know that the middleman doesn't always like that. But this is the democratization of information. People get all the information at the same time. But Allison,
it's hard for us to know when to take them seriously. If that suggestion, or that some people think it was a threat, he better hope that there's not audio tapes. If that wasn't a serious tweet, we should always take president seriously, just like too many Americans foolishly took seriously President Obama when he said, looked them in the eye and said, if you like your plan, keep your plan. If you like your doctor, keep your doctor. That cost a lot of people a ton of money, great angst, and health care, frankly, health coverage, if not lives. Kellyanne, why are the press briefings not being covered on camera from the White House?
Some are covered off camera, as they've been in other administrations. I'm all for full and fair access to the White House. I think that if there are people who want to make a name for themselves, increase their speaking fees by asking the same question 50 different times and never asking about job creation, never asking about how we're tackling the opioid crisis, never asking about what we're doing for veterans and military families and job seekers and job creators. So that's what you're worried about.
You don't want it on camera.
I'm not worried about anything. I'm not worried about anything with respect to that, because this is a very, very busy, very accessible press shop all day long. Members of CNN and others ask this press shop. I'm not part of Press and Comms, but I support their efforts. They are asked to provide information, to update information, and you have very hardworking men and women in this press shop doing that all day long.
And the press
briefings don't need to be on camera to be useful to the public and to be useful to our press corps, Allison. Why? Because you'll get the same information. And by the way, I find the richest points of the entire press briefings that Sean or Sarah or others do to be at the very beginning, when they're literally reading what the president and the cabinet secretaries are doing and the vice president that particular day. It gets such paucity of coverage compared to the Q&A. So
I think that one of the things is that when the press secretaries can't answer the questions about what the president's thinking, or if he believes that Russia interfered, or what he's thinking about the tweets, when they say, I haven't talked to the president about this, that is what is confusing. And frankly, there is accountability that then shows up to the American people on camera, and it's helpful to hear what the press secretaries can and can't answer.
Well, they're being truthful when they say that. Perhaps they haven't had a specific conversation with the president that day on that issue. But I just answered your question. The president did say, I believe as president-elect in January, when he read the report, that's very concerning, and that he thinks other people hack this country as well, try to hack this country, hack into our system as well. And that he, of course, I told you probably 6 different ways, as best I could at the beginning of this conversation, that the president himself has said he wants integrity at the ballot box. But we also know we just don't want to confuse the viewers today, especially those who are detractors and love to just hear the word Russia for no good reason, with no evidence to prove anything, that
you don't think
nothing affected the election result
today.
There's no effect on the election result. The 70,000 votes that people love to crow about in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan. But the fact, nothing to do with Moscow, everything to do with Macomb County, Michigan.
Yes, and we would love to hear exactly what the president is doing to make sure that Russia never interferes in our democracy.
I'll make you a deal. Make you a deal. You'll see that over time, and we would love more coverage on the opioid crisis, on job creation, on the regulatory rollback, on entrepreneurship.
How
about some fancy graphics of what the market thinks? How about the Home Builders Conference, the Manufacturers Conference, the S&P, the Dow Jones?
Right now, in our waning seconds, since I know you're being pulled away, what exactly is the president doing to fight opioid addiction?
So several things. Here at the White House, he has put full force in effect. He and the vice president have established the White House and Commission on opioid addiction and the drug crisis. It is headed by New Jersey Governor Chris Christie. It's a bipartisan commission that includes former Congressman Patrick Kennedy, who's been a very outspoken recovering addict who fights for mental health parity here. We have North Carolina Governor, Democratic Governor.
I understand you have an impressive commission, but the reason I ask is because this GOP health care new bill actually does nothing to address
That's
the
not true,
opioid
and that's
crisis,
not fair.
and it
That
takes
is
away
so
money
not fair.
from
This
all
White
sorts
House,
of
that's just
rehabs.
not fair.
Say that they are very disheartened by what they see in this new bill and that it's not helping them.
Allison, it actually helps no one to peddle the false rumor that this health care bill does, quote, nothing to help opioid.
So beyond the commission, what are you doing?
Hold on. Secretary of HHS Tom Price and I have traveled around talking to law enforcement, first responders, faith-based employers, the families who have suffered, the wonderful recovery stories of those who have successfully undergone treatment. And he has also given out the SAMHSA grants, close to $500 million in SAMHSA grants to these different states. Every state received according to their need and their population figures. There is funding to help combat this, but it has to be a combination here of interdiction, of prevention, and of treatment and recovery. And you don't hear a lot about treatment and recovery. You never hear the success stories.
Yeah.
You can fill up every seat there in Yankee Stadium, Allison, and that approximates the number of Americans who will succumb to drug overdoses
We know
this
everybody,
year.
every single person that I know has somebody connected.
There is money, there is
struggling.
attention, there is a multi-cabinet assault on this. It's DOJ, it's HHS, it's DOE, so we can educate our youth on this. I mean, goodness, the opioid addiction is its gateway to heroin use, fentanyl, carfentanil. We're just so happy that we have bipartisan juice behind this. We had a meeting with 10 United States senators here recently. 6 of them were Democrats, and I was very happy to see that.
We are happy to hear that. So, Kellyanne, we would love to talk more about this.
Thanks for the platform.
And
I'll be back.
Good. We would love to have you back to talk more about this. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks, Allison.
On
Take care.
New Day.